Finally, the moment a couple of you have been waiting for.
It's all like bing bong, Jack.
Coming to you from an undisclosed location in Duval and St. Johns County. The show for Jag fans by Jag fans.
You can't have a newcomer come in and steal the show.
Here are your hosts, Franklin and Michael how you say it? DeZoba. Welcome to the Jaggernaut Podcast. Welcome back to another Jaggernaut Podcast. I am Frank. That doppelganger over there is my brother Mike.
Duval!
So, on the docket for today, we're just sort of try to get you caught up on the little tidbits that have come out of the mini camp, voluntary, involuntary. I'm probably going to complain a little bit about the media. That's usually Mike's job.
Yeah, I rail against the local media. I'm telling you what, they are fanboys from. It doesn't matter. The team can be 0-16 or 1-16, and man, I'll be damned if they won't try to find some bright spots.
Yeah, and I think it's on that point that I think, I'm going to complain a little bit about him. I guess we can start there. So obviously Josh Allen, I don't know what you call it. I mean, I guess that's the thing. You don't really know what it is, and that's the confusing part.
It's a no-show for OTAs.
Yeah, and it's voluntary, but it's kind of a weird situation. So it's kind of funny because not everybody's there for the involuntary part. So that's kind of weird, right? So almost everybody but Josh Allen and Evan Ingram showed up for the quote-unquote voluntary portion, and then a bunch of people were basically told they didn't have to show up for the involuntary part, but then Josh Allen shows up for the involuntary part. So it gets people to wonder, like, well, they're kind of forcing his hand, I guess, but then they're like, oh, but it's not a punishment. So it's this whole weird dynamic involved with that. And I think I was listening to John Osher today, and he was basically saying, let me see, he goes, and I've heard him say this before, and it just locked into me, and I don't know why this particular issue is bothering me so much, but he said, he goes, I'm pretty sure he said something like, my sense is, and then he goes, and I haven't talked to Josh myself, and then he began to give his opinion, which was a garbage opinion because, for one, it was the typical, covering for the team, making it seem like anybody who is wondering about it shouldn't be, it's no big deal, kind of an opinion. And I'm thinking, you're the embedded team reporter. Shouldn't you be asking these questions? Why are you sitting up there saying, my sense is, like, what are you, Madame Cleo? We don't want your sense. We don't want your opinion. We want you to be a reporter. Go ask the questions. Be a journalist. Like, this is what your job is. And it sort of frustrated me a little bit, probably more than what it should have. And it makes me want to just touch a little bit on the Josh Allen situation. And I know he did last time. I think it was the last time we talked, and of course I don't think he had showed up at that point. It was still voluntary, and he was out. So I mean, what is your thoughts on Josh Allen? Is it a big deal that he's the situation?
I think it is exactly what I said last week. This is about money. He wants a contract. That's why he held out. If he would have gotten paid, a 5-year, $80 million contract, he would have showed up.
Yeah, I think that sort of boils it down.
This is really about the money. And John Osher, he's getting paid by the Jags. So he's never going to say anything that's going to look bad or maybe potentially discredit the team. Because what happens when the NFLPA finds out that some of these players who don't show up for voluntary workout are having to do something extra because they didn't show up for voluntary workout.
Yeah, and now, well, in fairness to the team on that point, there are players who were at the voluntary workout that are also staying for, I guess they're not being allowed to leave. I don't know how to me it's a weird dynamic where you say all these people showed up to the voluntary camp and we're going to allow everybody to go and not show up for the involuntary portion, but you and then the guy who didn't show up. So that seems like a weird situation, and I didn't care for Josh Allen's comments afterwards either. It's like, so of course they asked him about it, and he says, I had to work on myself or something like that. That might have been a direct quote. I mean, something to that effect. I was just working on myself. What? I don't even know what that means. Like, what does that mean? And then it got me thinking too, because, okay, so if there's the involuntary portion and then the voluntary portion, did he know that if he showed up to the voluntary portion that he might be able to not have to participate in the involuntary portion? Because then he could have done the team stuff. Nobody would have ever asked a question at that point. He would have been dismissed. Hey, everyone's here. It's great, except for Everin, who hasn't signed his contract, which makes some sense. We all know that's contractual. So, and then he could be released, and he can then go work on himself. He could be working on himself now. So I hate the whole. I would have respected it a little bit more if he said, we're in negotiations. They know I want a contract. It's voluntary, and it's just one of these things you sort of do just to make sure that they know you're serious, and I want to let them know I'm serious about wanting to stay here and be a Jag, and I want to have a contract. And in order to do that, I felt like I needed to just stay out of the voluntary part, and then when it became involuntary, I would show up. I would be super pleased to just hear that. It's honest. It's like, look, I want a contract, everybody knows I want a contract. Everybody wants the contract. I'm on my rookie deal. I want a new contract. I wouldn't hate that. That's just the business. They even say that. It's like the business of the game. Okay, well then say it. Why all this weirdness? Just say it. It doesn't hurt me as a fan for him to say that. I wouldn't even question his loyalty to the team per se. Because you could couch it in terms of saying, look, I want to be a Jaguar forever, but I also want to be paid, and I know I'm one of the better defensive ends in the league, and you can argue about that, but,
Well, as far as I know, John Osher and Josh Allen don't give two shits about what you think or about what you want to hear. And truth be told, they're not going to tell you the truth. It was involuntary. He showed up because he's contractually obligated to do so. Now, could he held out longer? Yes, he could have, to continue to work on himself. Maybe he felt the work was done and it was time to come back. Look.
He's figured it out.
Dude, I'm going to tell you, we know that there's coach speak and horse shit. And we know that a lot of times these players, these coaches, these team mouthpieces speak horse shit. We also know that the local media, the people you hear on the radio, they speak horseshit, because the Jags are the only game in town. Nobody's covering the shrimp, right? I mean, the Jags are the only game in town. And if they start really laying to them with these questions and not taking the coach speak or just the narrative that other players have said in the past as gospel, and then saying, well, that's what they said. It's like, yeah, no shit. I heard him. It's like, but why didn't you ask this? Why didn't you ask the coach this? Why didn't you ask the coach that? And some people do, but it's rare. It's very rare. And then nobody reports on it. Nobody cares, because they all get paid from the system.
I,
they don't want to be ostracized for being that guy.
I get that, but I don't know why it's necessary anymore in this day and age when there's so much media coverage. I feel like I feel like they think we're stupid in a way. That's what I almost feel like. I don't even if they care about that's not even important to me so much. What I don't want them to do is pretend and play games. Even if the reporters, from the reporter standpoint, they said, "Look, y'all want me to go ask the question, but y'all know what the issue is." Even I'd have respected that. Like, I didn't ask the question because we all know it's his business. If he didn't want to show up, I'm not even going to ask him the question. I'd respect that, as opposed to coming out and going, "Well, it's not a big deal." So that throws the onus on the people who have a question about it. It's like we're the bad people for even wondering if there's some sort of friction between Josh and the team now. And I'm like, no, we're saying that because that's what's obvious. We're not crazy here. And just them pretending like, oh, he's just working on himself. And Josh is part of that. You know, he's foisting this sort of I don't know. I just don't understand why the games need to be played. Is all I'm saying. Be open and honest about it. Yeah, I want a new contract. Simple as that.
And
Just be
chances
real
are,
about it.
behind closed doors between Doug Peterson and Josh Allen, Trent Baalke, that's where the honesty is taking place.
Yeah.
And you know what? They're not inclined to be honest with you. They don't have to be honest.
They don't. But I'm just wondering why. I don't know that this strategy's better, is what I'm saying. And I don't know. Like, I get coach speak. I really do. There's times when, like, I've talked about this with you. You've said, well, you need to call people to the carpet, and that's been your opinion at times. That's come out. Well, you need to say this guy stinks, sort of thing. And I'm like, no, you don't. I don't think you do. I don't know what the benefit is. As a coach comes out and says somebody's playing bad, a lot of times they cover for the guy. I get all that, and I would actually probably do that if I was a coach too. So coach speak, I get. In this case, I don't understand the benefit of it.
Because if he came out, okay, the other side of the coin on this is that if he came out and he said, look, I want a contract. Everybody knows I want a contract. These are voluntary. Voluntary means I don't have to if I don't want to. So I didn't, right? You said, well, I'd love that. You know what? ESPN, because they got nothing better to do, would say, holy shit, there's a shitstorm brewing in Jacksonville. Josh Allen.
Yeah, you might be right.
He's not coming because of contract. You know, these guys, for the coaches, for the players, for the GM, it's almost damned if you do and damned if you don't. If you're honest and you're open, somebody takes it and runs with it and says, oh my God, the house is falling down or burning down. What's going to happen? You know? So, I mean, I completely get that. I mean, you can't, in our Karenistic society, you can't do that.
Hey, dude, you just stumbled on a new word. I've never heard that before.
That's right.
Karenistic.
You guys heard it here first. I'm going to go ahead and copyright that.
Yeah, we'll make a t-shirt. Karenistic, definition.
Yeah. Anyway, so there is some positive news coming out of camp. First thing I'm gonna put out there, nobody got hurt. That's positive.
I didn't even have that noted. That's a good point.
So nobody got hurt. That is extremely positive. That's what we want to hear. Awesome. They have 5 weeks to sort of hang out, re-energize themselves, and they get ready to come back for training camp. So Frank, I heard that Deshaun Dixon, who I don't really even know who that is, was playing outside last year, and now they're going to try to move him to inside. So he's either going to be a big end or a defensive tackle, and I'm guessing since he went outside, it'll probably be a big end.
Yeah, I'm confused on. I remember his name, but I don't. What I'm confused about is whether last year he was outside linebacker or whether he was defensive end, and I'm guessing he probably was outside linebacker for
That's
it to
my
be
guess.
a big deal, because going from 3-4 defensive end, plus you'd be nose tackle That would be how you would slide inside on a 3-4 is you'd go. So he must have been outside linebacker last year.
So that's what I got. And I've heard Kevin Austin is doing very well. He was the undrafted rookie last year out of Notre Dame. He came out of college with a troubled past, but he came into college with a bit of a pedigree.
Right.
And he had some good performances, and then his last year in college was not very good, and then he got in trouble. So, and fans, as fans, we fan. So we're like, oh, this dude might be good, and then he never showed up, which is fine because last year you didn't hear much about him. He wasn't having a great camp. But sometimes it just takes that one time to turn it on. Now, granted, this is T-shirts and underwear, and hell, I could look good in a T-shirt and an underwear, but you put pads on me and to tell some dude who's going to make $10 million to come hit me, and that changes the game.
Then you turn into Blaine Gabbert.
Yeah. So, hey, that's a great reference.
Oh.
It's a great reference for you older Jags fans.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it does change the game, but I do like to hear stuff like this because I start to put together a list of guys I want to watch in the preseason. Guys I want to pay attention to when we go out to training camp. This is how I get my list.
Yeah.
You heard anything else? What you got?
Elijah Cooks. He is also performing well. Same position, wide receiver. Same situation, except for he's actually doing what Austin failed to do, which is to look good in the camp right after you come into it from being a rookie. So Elijah Cooks is an unrestricted free agent rookie that we picked up, and just like Austin
like an
was last year.
Hearns. Y'all remember Alan Hearns, right?
Well, is it Tim? Who's the other guy that's on our team? Tim? Is it?
I knew the minute you started.
Yeah, I know it.
The
Cooks.
Mess me
it's
up.
his last name's similar to Cooks. That's why it's throwing me off. But anyway, he's been looking pretty decent too. And of course, he was on the roster last year, and he made some plays.
I know what
here
you're
and there.
talking about because in the preseason, it was him that was showing out.
Yep.
That I was like, man, that dude can ball.
Yep. And he hasn't lost anything. Okay. So wide receiver core looks deep. Like you said, underwear right now. So that's always the caveat to this sort of situation. Tank Bigsby, that's the guy. He's the one name that pops up a lot. He's the guy that people are just wowed by. And he plays running back, and that definitely is a position that the complexion changes when the pads go on. So, but right now they're saying it. That guy looks bigger, stronger, and faster than what he was expected to look like.
Again, writing my list for the preseason so that I can take my notes when I watch these games.
Yeah, and can you imagine? So Snoop.
Yeah, I didn't like.
Bye,
again,
Snoop.
I didn't get to watch a ton of practice last year, but to me, Mekhi Sargent outplayed Snoop Connor in the games.
Yeah.
So I don't know why we kept them. And again, when my eyes tell me something and the coaching staff does something else, it makes me scratch my head a little bit.
Yeah.
I usually lean toward them because they have years of experience. So maybe they know more than I do, but believe it or not, football is football.
I think part of it comes down to, though, if you think about it, you can release a Mekhi Sargent and sign him to practice squad, and whereas Snoop Connor, if you thought a lot of him, then maybe other teams did in the draft as well. You release him because you go Mekhi Sargent slightly outplayed him. Let's just say slightly. Then teams will snatch Snoop, whereas you could probably put Mekhi on your practice squad and have both of them. Yeah, that may be the thinking there. I like you. Sargent didn't. I vaguely remember Sargent. I remember Snoop Connor more for what he didn't do. I just remember glaring vision problems with him. Like I I saw zero lack of vision last year from what I saw. It was amazingly terrible running on his behalf is what I saw. You can improve on that, I suppose. I tend to think vision's sort of like an instinct for a running back, though. Obviously, not every play is going to be the best example. If that's a skill trait, you're still going to have, even if you're good, usually you may have a bad play for whatever reason. But I just remember thinking that guy, he just didn't know what to do with the ball. They handed it to him, and the hole would be there, and he just wouldn't see it for some reason. And it would happen a few times. So I'm not surprised. But anyway, the only other thing I can think of about talking about this, let's see, we talked about Elijah Cooks. Calvin Ridley is looking the part. He seems to be, from what you can tell in underwear practice, he at least has come in and he looks like the type of receiver, he's not disappointing, I guess is the way to say it. And a couple of names that I want to keep my eye on, especially since we lost 2 tight ends this offseason, are Garrett Prince and Sammis Reyes. So those are names to, when a preseason rolls around, it's kind of like jars on the shelf for that position. Who knows what's going to happen with Evan Ingram? It certainly looks like he'll be playing this year on the franchise tag. And if Josh Allen is going to play, which it looks like he's going to play on his 5th year, the last year of his rookie contract, so you can't franchise tag both of those guys. So if Evan has a good year and Josh has a good year, and I was thinking about this today, not to just make this all about Josh Allen, but we were negative about Josh Allen. This may seem more positive. I would re-sign Josh Allen. I think the idea of, if you look at his stats, he stacks up really well, except for in one area, and that's the sack. He's there. He's high in quarterback, in affecting the quarterback. He's great against the run. Like, he literally has no weaknesses. It's just he isn't great at finishing the deal and getting that sack. And I think if the defense gets better overall, you'll see that sort of thing start. I don't know how are we assuming Trayvon's going to turn the corner and be great? I mean, I don't know why we would assume that. You go, okay, are we going to overpay for Josh? Sure, we're going to overpay. But let me tell you something. If he gets 12 sacks this year, he will set the market for defense. Think about that. He literally will. He will be up there with the Bosas, and he will, justifiably so, because his numbers match all the high defensive ends. He's around those guys apart from sacks. So if he adds that to the mix, a team will set the market with Josh Allen. They will do it. So now what are you going to do? So we'd almost be forced to franchise tag and then be in a weird situation next year. So I don't know. I wanted to get that off my chest. I was thinking about that.
Woo. Man, I'm glad you can sleep well tonight.
Yeah, I feel better now. I can sleep.
So
finally.
last week, in case you missed it, which I'm sure a lot of you did, but that's fine. You can go back and rewatch it. The greatness of YouTube. We went over quarterbacks. We did a top 10 quarterback listing. Because Frank, you got in an argument in Discord and you wanted to be validated. Okay, so this is the arena to allow you some of that validation. This week, we're going to do receivers.
I'm all about validation.
Yeah, I know. I know you are, man. Ooh. Frank, I'm going to throw out my number 1.
Okay.
You tell me where it ranks on your list. Even if it's on your list, who knows? I think it's got to be them. The Bengals.
Bengals are your number 1?
The Bengals are my number 1, yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to cheat and show everybody my list here.
Well, I can't see it.
Everybody can see my list, and this is everybody but Mike. But so let me say how I came up with my list first of all. I basically went to a fantasy football site. Now, the reason I did that was because we're talking about
Slacker.
well, they use yards, receptions, and touchdowns, and that's what we're talking about when it comes to a receiving core. How they placed and how they ranked was how I ranked them. So in other words, who had the best tight end? Obviously, the Chiefs. Kelsey's the number one tight end. So that adds to the list. So basically, two to three wide receivers and a tight end make up your wide receiving core. And where do those players coming into this year rank in everybody's mind? To me, it was a clear-cut way to do it. When I did it this way, some things, unexpected things happened. So you said Bengals are number one.
For me, yes, I have the Bengals number one.
Okay,
They have a first, they have a second, they have a third, they have an okay tight end. The one place where they probably could improve the most is on their tight end, but they may not even use him that much. So I'm not sure. But they have a first, a second, and a third. And that third is just as good as a lot of teams' second. The second could be just as good as some teams' first. So to me, as far as a wide receiver core, if I had to knock one thing on them,
Boyd is their third, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
If I had to knock one thing on them, it would be a lack of a tight end.
Okay, here's where Cincy lands on my list, and I'm going to have to go back and see if adding Boyd in there, because apparently I missed Boyd. I'd have to go see where he lands and see if that changes. Now, I did an average, so we'll see.
All right, well, where do you have him?
I have him at 8. They're the 8th best receiving group. And like I said, some surprising things. This is just the way it laid out. I don't.
Give us your number 2.
Well, I got to give you my number 1.
Oh, okay, that's right. We're all off.
Yeah, my number 1's Philly. That's where Philly came out number 1. If you looked at A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and then you added Goddard into the mix, they are, and they were clearly the number 1. Now, I knew they had a good. Like, I'm not surprised they're up there. I was surprised at the gap, actually. So Philly actually has, based on this, and you can question the methodology, and that's completely fair to do, in this way that they came out number 1.
So number 2 for me are the Eagles.
Okay.
And the only reason I put them down there, who's their number 3?
Who? The Eagles?
Can you tell me who because I can tell you who he is, and I can tell you he sucks.
Yeah. And I tried at times to find the third wide receiver to see if there was, because if that would change things if they were way up, but he was probably way down. It didn't matter.
Yeah, you would have to go down to probably 90s.
Yeah.
100s. His name is Quez Watkins.
Right.
He is not good.
Right.
So to me, like so for their tight end and their top 2 starting wide receivers, I could find no fault. It was that third guy that I'm like, So to me, I gave the Bengals a little bump because their third guy is better. Goddard's a better tight end, and I'm not even arguing tight ends, right? Yeah. So maybe you could take one and place one with the other one. Maybe it's 1A, 1B.
Yeah.
But yes. But their third wide receiver is just, it's hot buttered garbage.
Yeah. So I'll do number 2 for mine. I have Buffalo. Buffalo comes in next. Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, and Knox. Knox actually is he's higher tight end than what I imagined based on, statistically looking back and the way he's valued. So that trio there is a solid number 2. It's coming in number 2.
All right, see, and so for me, we're on to my number 3, and it is not Buffalo. It's the 49ers.
I thought the 49ers would... in my mind, 49ers have one of the best receiving cores, for sure.
You got George Kittle there, and if you ask me George Kittle versus Dawson Knox, it's got to be George Kittle.
Oh yeah, no, that's true.
Right now, Buffalo has Diggs, and this is what my brain was thinking, but they have nobody else who is behind Diggs who is that good. I think Brandon Ayuk, stat wise, is better than anybody else that Buffalo has at the moment. And then you have Debo. Debo isn't as good as Stephon Diggs as far as just a wide receiver goes.
Yeah.
But then when you start to look at his running ability, playing the running back, doing some of the little gadget stuff that he could do, it's getting closer, right? So I still give it to Diggs, but then I got Debo, and then I got Ayuk, and then I have George Kittle, and then I got the rest of the Buffalo Bills. So the Buffalo Bills are.
Yeah, you're getting me to think my methodology is off.
They're sixth on me. They're sixth on my list.
Buffalo?
Yeah.
That's hilarious because I've got the 49ers as sixth on my list. So that's crazy how it worked out that way. And I think to some extent we're splitting hairs a little bit here. But yeah, everything you said makes a lot of sense. I don't know why it lines up this way. I just know that, let me look at the way it works out. I mean, the 49ers are super strong at tight end. Like he's Kittle's number 2, and then Debo's 15th. And that's super strong too, but then for whatever reason, Ayuk's coming in at 34, and that just averages out less because I don't know why, but Gabe Davis is coming in higher than Ayuk, which I don't like that either. It was just the site I was using, and I just took the raw numbers, the way that they had him valued.
But that's what this is for, man.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what this is for.
But I would definitely take Ayuk over Gabe Davis. So, yeah. But, yeah, so I kind of agree with you. I think my list needs to be massaged to reality a little bit to a certain extent.
Yeah, so I mean, I went in and I'm like, okay, who are their top 3 receivers? Who's their tight end?
Yeah.
All right. Where not in fantasy league, but where does my mind say that these guys are better than the other ones? Right. Now, right now, as we talked about, Diggs and Debo. Diggs is the better wide receiver, but Debo is good, but then he has all those little other attributes. Fantasy's not telling you about those little attributes. So,
yeah, you're right.
I guess it really just depends.
All right, and I don't know. I still feel like Debo would still be high based on his runs because you're still going to get points for that, but maybe in a PPR league, and if it's stacked that way, because he runs a lot, maybe. But still, Debo's a super good fantasy selection. So
who's your number 3?
Surprisingly, Jacksonville.
Okay.
Believe it or not, they came in. Christian Kirk on this list was the 11th ranked wide receiver. Believe it or not, Zay Jones was 29th. And if you add Evan Ingram coming in at the 6th best tight end, that average comes up and puts them right behind Buffalo. I was super surprised to see it that way.
We're not so far off on that, I guess. I do not have that. I have the Jags as number 5 on my list.
Yeah.
So
I would have thought 5 in my head, actually. So that's interesting.
And it's weird. If Calvin Ridley performs, of course that gets pushed up.
And here's the thing. I don't even have Ridley in this. So that's how interesting the Jags wide receiving core actually is, because I can't account for Ridley because he's been out. But in the real world aspect of it, it's like, man, we might have the best receiving core, possibly. It's not out of the realm.
80 catches, over 1,000 yards for 3 of them. And the only place they lacked is where touchdowns. So what do they got? 5 touchdowns. They, some had more, some had, I think, at least a minimum of 5. To me, that puts them square at 5, with Ridley possibly pushing them higher.
Yeah. So regardless, we're looking at a top 5 receiving core plus because of Ridley. And then if you think about, we had talked about the last 2 episodes have been a good deal devoted to Trevor and where we expect him to be next year. And this is one of the reasons why I think in the real world, when you're just when you have expectation, then I think it's not unreasonable to expect some jump. So that should be significant and statistically for Trevor this year. So I'll go. We're at 4, right?
Yes, I'm at my 4. You're at 4 now.
Okay, Seattle came in 4th for me. Tyler Lockett, DK
Interesting.
Metcalf are both really high. And Noah Fant actually comes in decently high too. And it's interesting, they all kind of cluster together in the teens. So 13, 19, and 18.
So to me, DK, while a beast and a hard receiver to cover, doesn't seem to be their best receiver. It seems to be Tyler Lockett. They have
Yeah.
no number 3. DK is like this, and Noah Fant, he isn't all that great. He wasn't great at Denver. He's not great here. He's just middle average, like
Right.
not even good average, middle average. So to me, Seattle's down there. Seattle's, I think, right where you put the Bengals. I think they're 9. So for me, number 4, and I may take some flack on this, and maybe I'll have to go back and look at this a little bit. I put Miami. You know,
Dude, if they had not lost Gesicki, they might be number 1.
well, so yeah, I mean, granted, Miami suffers the same problems that the Eagles suffer. No number 3,
Yeah, right.
right? But they
But no
have a
tight
hell
end
of a
either.
2. Well, not anymore, but they have a hell of a 2. You know, their 2 number 1s are hella good.
Oh, yeah.
So
I
it's
mean,
like, okay, well, where do you put them? You know, I couldn't put Seattle above Miami receiving corps.
no, they don't come in.
So
It's interesting, and this may be the flaw in this ranking that I've put together, because it depends on how heavily you want to focus on the tight end. So now my thought is too, I didn't, and it sounds like you are harming teams for their third wide out. So if they have a really pedestrian third wide receiver, then that hurts teams that don't. In my mind, I like the idea of not harming teams, because you can do it with 2 wide receivers and they just get more opportunities. You know, there's only one ball. So to me, like for Miami, it doesn't matter that they are missing a third wide receiver of any note. Their 2 wide receivers are top 10 easy wide receivers.
wow.
So it's like, if they had any sort of tight end play, they would clear. And so for me, just I've got Miami in this, the way I've got it tallied, coming in at 7, and that's clearly just based on their 2 wide receivers.
Okay. So the next up, I got the Jags. That's where I put them in at.
I got Minnesota.
So it's funny, Minnesota did not make my list.
Yeah. Well,
So,
Justin Jefferson's the number 1 receiver.
and who
But
else?
yeah, I mean, they've got Hawkinson, and
Yeah.
Hawkinson's a good tight end, but
Okay.
Minnesota, I don't know what you do. I mean, they've got KJ Osborne, who was their 3rd and is now their 2nd, so that's kind of hurting them. But still, Justin Jefferson and Hawkinson are coming in so high on fantasy lists in regards to how they performed last year. It's bringing the average up.
Well, yeah, Minnesota didn't make my list. They don't have a number 2. They don't have a number 3.
Right,
Didn't make my list.
right. No, that's fair.
And Minnesota falls into the Atlanta territory, right? Because Atlanta had a rookie wide Drake London last year, and then they had Pitts,
Yeah.
but they have no 2, they have no 3. It's like, how can I put them even in a top 10 with that? So I struggled mightily with this. Next, I had Buffalo.
Okay.
Now,
And I have
and then you
49ers next.
Yeah, okay, I got that written down for you. All right, so
Yeah.
then the next one I have the Cowgirls, Dallas Cowgirls.
It's interesting. I don't even have the Cowboys on my list, and I go to 13.
Really?
Yeah.
All right, who do you have? Who do you have there then?
So Cincinnati's at 8. So basically, so Where are we at? 5 is Minnesota, 49ers, Miami, and then Cincinnati at 8.
Well, who do you have for 6?
49ers.
Okay, I must have missed. Oh, Miami. Okay, never mind. All right. Yeah, I have the Cowboys there.
Yeah, and this isn't how I value them. This is just how the math worked out when I just averaged their average positions out in value in regards to fantasy, which to me is an okay way to do it. It's just a way to gauge it and see where it comes out, because fantasy is metadata. I mean, you're dealing with a lot of aggregates that are thrown in there to get a value that majority of people agree. It's like, oh, Justin Jefferson is the clear number 1 wide receiver, and that
and
sort of thing.
I'll agree for fantasy purposes, and even in the NFL, I think him and
That's what I'm
Jamar
saying.
Chase. Okay, so I can see that, but we're talking core.
Yeah.
And to me, you got to have more than one.
Well, that's why the average is helpful. And like I said, and I understand if you're going to value a 3 wide out, and then you have a team that doesn't have anybody. But first of all, we don't know who the wide out's going to be. They may, but in regards to last year, as it stands right now, they've got nobody of note. It doesn't hurt them in mine, whereas it hurts them in yours. Yeah. And the reason is because, again, there's only one ball. My thought process is it doesn't matter. They'll just throw more to their 1 and 2 and their tight end. So some of them I had an additional wide receiver thrown in there, and again, I'm just taking an average. And sometimes I'd throw a 3rd wide out in there because they were prominent and appeared, and it didn't even adjust the average that much. So just the way it worked out.
My next one, Seattle, and that's where I go blank.
Okay. So, and what number is that?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Okay.
8.
So the next one I've got is Washington. So that's Terry McLaurin, Chris Samuel, and Logan Thomas. Then do the New York Jets pop up? But of course, and this is where it gets a little weird, because they're relying on 2 players whose stats are coming from other teams. So how valuable do you want to, does that knock them down? I think in the real world it should, Of course, they're getting Aaron Rodgers too. So how does that add to it? I don't know.
But you could put them in the same category as the Saints, right? I mean, neither one of them really got a tight end. They both have a really good rookie receiver, and then 2 okay receivers. We don't even know what Michael Thomas is going to give us this year. So, right. and then their 3rd receiver, I don't even know who they have.
Right.
So it's like, all right, again, there are so many teams you can put into the Atlanta, Jets, Giants, category where they have major question marks in my eyes,
Yeah. And let's just finish it out. So, and this is a group that I thought was going to be higher, but the Chargers, and mainly because of the way you're thinking, is that when you start thinking about 3rd wide receivers, you got Josh Palmer. So Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Josh Palmer, and then Gerald Everett. And you think about this, because he spreads the ball out to these guys a decent amount, so they get.
Well, here's the problem. You have Keenan Allen, and you have who's their second?
Mike Williams.
Yeah, Mike Williams, and then you got Austin Eckler and nobody else. So you can take, and Austin Eckler's a running back. So if you take Austin Eckler away, you got 2 guys.
It's not the way the stats are showing. Josh Palmer and Gerald Everett popped in pretty decently.
Not the way fantasy is showing it. And I understand that Gerald Everett did well against us.
Is there anybody else in your mind that should pop up? Like, if I'm rounding out a top 10, who am I lacking? Is there anything? I mean, there's no wrong answer. I'm just curious if there's somebody that you wanted to put in. And
like, literally, I thought about this, and I thought maybe Tampa Bay. So I went over there. Yep, and I was looking at Tampa Bay, and I'm like, well, Tampa Bay could be up there. But then I'm like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and then the next one, and of course I'm at 12 with Tampa Bay, so I'm already past top 10. And I stopped here because I thought, I mean, how could you not have the Chiefs, somewhere in there? And this is one that I think the real world This is where the stats are misleading for me. Not only do you have, the best quarterback there throwing the ball out, but in my mind, if you watched and paid attention, Kadarius Toney began to emerge toward the end of the season. So the stats don't show what I think they actually have in regards to value at their number two, and I would argue even their number one wide receiver, maybe Kadarius Toney. I mean, you got Valdez Scantling, Kadarius Toney, and then some guy named Richie James. I don't even remember, but he's catching the
And
ball plus Kelsey. So
yeah, Kelsey was all Kelsey was all I could come up with.
you
I
forgot about
understand.
Kadarius Toney though, man. It's what I'm
So,
saying.
and I saw him coming on sort of at the end of the year, but you know what? When I looked at them, I'm like, God damn, is Patrick Mahomes really that good?
I know.
Like he's playing
Yeah.
outside of Kelsey and Mahomes, he ain't playing with nobody.
I know. Yeah, right.
So
It
I don't know, man. That's depressing.
that's definitely what you come away with thinking, wow, Mahomes is that good,
But yeah, I mean, I
So-
looked at Denver, but I put Denver in the same kind of category, and I'm like, man, none of these teams deserve to come up into the top 10, into my top 10.
Yeah.
So I couldn't come up with the top 10. So I'm like, all right, I'll
And
stop at 9.
I think Denver did. I don't remember exactly everything that occurred with Denver. I feel like maybe they had a bunch of issues last year. That I know Patrick was injured. It feels like he's injured every year. I don't know.
So is Judy.
Judy got
Yeah.
injured last year, right? So I just feel like there's talent there, but statistically, they're just not capitalizing on that talent. So they could be a team that has an amazing receiving core if they could all stay healthy. I don't remember who their tight end is. I know Fant was on their team. It doesn't matter. But I think that just gives you a nice barometer. I mean, for our show's purpose, I think it shows, once again, we have something really interesting to watch unfold this year. What is this receiving core going to look like? I shouldn't have been shocked. Zay Jones was pretty high, but if you think about it, I mean, he caught a decent amount of balls. He almost he was close to being 1,000-yard receiver. We almost had 2,000-yard receivers last year.
3 if you count Evan Ingram.
Yeah, Evan Ingram. I mean,
I
Jones,
gave
Kirk, and then you throw Ridley in the mix.
Yep, I went ahead and gave that. I thought Zay Jones was close enough. I gave it to him. Like,
Yeah.
Welcome to be a Jaggernaut podcast.
And I just think the idea too, one more, of course, we're kind of repeating a little bit of what we said in past podcasts, but the idea that one more year of familiarity with this offense, Peterson being familiar with the weapons that he has and what they can do, the idea of bringing Ridley in, that true X wide receiver that does change how defensive coordinators have to work a lot of times against you. I could see Kirk having more open opportunities, his yak yardage going up. Zay Jones probably isn't going to get as much opportunity, but he probably will have a higher percentage. When he gets his opportunities, they'll be more impactful, although he was pretty impactful last year, stuff like that. So it's interesting to see how the ball is going to be spread around, what it means. The offense should be dynamite. I mean, if Tank Bisbee comes in and actually looks like this counterpunch to ETN, wow. Like, this is a really stacked offense. I mean, really stacked when you start looking at it.
Well, we will see. Woo! Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for watching. If you liked it, hit the like, subscribe button. Go back, check our comments. If you disagree, or if you think some reason why we left a team out or didn't put a team in, or whatever you want to call it, put it down in the comments. We can discuss it.
No question. So until next time, we'll We'll catch you later.
Duo! There you go.